When it comes to the Skylanders, it isn't exactly a secret that the organization has its fair list of shady members. Former assassins, bounty hunters, and even killers were able to call the Skylanders home at one point. But a group of these former bad guys stand out the most to me, and these Skylanders are the former villains from Trap Team. Like I said in the previous video, to my knowledge there's only about 10 of them, and if I'm correct, I've only covered about 4. So that gives me more than enough Skylanders to talk about. And after I did some digging into some of these characters, I was shook. To be perfectly honest with you, I was not expecting how borderline insane some of these characters' backstories are. One of them was so insane that I was speculating on them for hours, I nearly lost my mind on the second one, and I almost made the third one its own video. But I decided that it would be best to make that whole adventure its own separate video. As you can likely tell, I have a ton of things that I want to get into and talk about today. But what makes a lot of this absolutely crazy is that most of these characters aren't even the main Doom Raiders. So today we're going to go over the rest of the Skylanders with villainous pasts. So without any more stalling, let's get straight into this.
A watery grave awaits.
When it comes to our first Skylander of today, I think a lot of you are probably looking at him and wondering what is going on with him. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, let me explain. If you don't know, Clobber first made his appearance in Skylanders Trap Team as a trappable Earth villain, and then when he made an appearance as an actual Skylander in Imaginators, he somehow went from the Earth element to the water element. As you can imagine, this makes absolutely no sense. So once again, I delved into his development history, and there isn't a solid answer there either besides a water slot being open. But what I did learn is that Clobber switching elements was one of Nat's biggest problems when making characters for Imaginators. In an attempt to try and make this make sense, he tried to give Clobber a more luchador-like look and switched out a lot of his attacks. But with that out the way, let's get straight into his backstory and see if there's any answers there. Before Clobber was a mummy, he used to be a great pharaoh who ruled the Golden Desert long ago. And even though we don't know what exactly caused this, we do know that he fell victim to his 7 brothers, who assassinated him by burying him in an underwater tomb while he was sleeping. And even though he was gone, that didn't stop the fighting between his siblings. Instead of working together or trying to elect someone to rule, the brothers would continue to fight amongst themselves, and it would ultimately lead to their civilization falling apart. And even though they would survive the collapse, they wouldn't for long. Clobber would eventually rise out of his watery grave, and after he learned about what his brothers did, he would hunt every last one of them down and clobber them, which would eventually draw the attention of the Golden Queen, who would recruit him into the Doom Raiders. The Golden Queen would then summon him to fight off the Skylanders, and even though he put up a good fight, he was eventually captured, and the Skylanders would take him with them to the Golden Queen's lair, and he would help rescue Flynn, who apparently got himself captured, and as thanks, he would get a new outfit from Callie. After those events, Eon slowly began to realize that he might be able to set Clobber on a better path, so he gave the former pharaoh a chance at redemption, by making him a sensei, and Clobber would go on to become a teacher of the Brawler class. Now, let's take a minute to stop and talk about the biggest question surrounding Clobber. How did he manage to switch from Earth to water? Those two elements are almost the furthest apart from each other in almost every aspect, so it was really confusing. Now, I did see a couple of people say that because he was drowned by his brothers, he became one with the water element, which would make sense. But if anything, that would make the situation worse because it changed the question from, how did he become a Skylander of the water element to, why was he part of the Earth element in Trap Team? Now, that in of itself is hard enough to answer, but with all the information that I've gathered so far, that means that he went from the Earth element to the water element, then back to the Earth element, then back to the water element. That's 4 times this one Skylander switched elements, far more than anyone who actually has switched elements. The only parts that make sense is him switching to the water element the first time because he drowned, but that in of itself raises the question of, why is he not undead? He is every sense of the word undead. He's a mummy for crying out loud. Everything surrounding this topic is such a confusing mess that the more you think about it or question it, the more questions you're going to have. But the best thing that I got is that he was originally of the Earth element, he drowned and became part of the water element, he somehow dried himself out while he was hunting his brothers, or the Golden Queen potentially did something to bring him back, and then he somehow returned to the water element. Even though it has some problems with it, I still believe that this is the best explanation that I could have come up with, but with that being said, I think it's about time that we get into the next Skylander of today.
The spirit is willing.
When it comes to Bad Juju, she is extremely special for a multitude of reasons, but one of the biggest is Juju Jr. Now, I know that this isn't the first time that a Skylander had children of some sort, or even worked together as Skylanders, but the reason why Bad Juju is so special is because she had a child between games. To my knowledge, I think she's the only character to ever do that, and the way that it happened was absolutely wild, so I'm going to skip over her development history for now and jump straight into her backstory. Before Bad Juju was even involved with the Skylanders, she used to be a witch doctor who put curses on her patients instead of curing them, and because of this, the Golden Queen would make Bad Juju her right-hand sorceress. She would remain inside the Golden Queen's lair, and to my guess, nap most of the time since there wasn't really anything to do, but when the Skylanders raided and inadvertently woke her up, she was furious, taking the Skylanders head-on, which eventually led to her capture. And while she was there with the Skylanders, she would help Glumshanks receive a remote that would help put an end to the Golden Queen's plans, and as things, she would not only get an outfit, but a beetle hat as well. Even though she did all of these good deeds, she would eventually return to villainy after the events of Trap Team, and she would continue to do so until her son came into the picture. We don't exactly know what she was doing at the time, but she would somehow conjure Juju Jr. into existence, and because of him just being there now, something would snap within her. She didn't want to raise this child from a prison and have him growing up thinking that she was nothing but a criminal, so she would change her life around. She would go and seek Eon out and ask him to give her a chance to be a hero instead, something that Eon would grant her. As luck would have it, Eon would just so happen to be looking for a new sensei for the Skylanders, and because of this, she would become a sensei of the Swashbuckler class, making sure that her students didn't wander down the path that she did. Now, I know that there's a lot of things about the story that I can talk about, but one of the biggest is the fact that Juju Jr. fights alongside his mother. I'm kinda surprised that she would even allow this to happen, since she seems to care about him a lot, but we already know that the Skylanders just kinda don't care about putting children in harm's way, or at least Eon, and it's probably because of the portals. When a Skylander is defeated, they aren't killed, but instead it says that the Skylander is tired and that they need to rest, which makes me think that the Skylanders can take far more damage than they actually do in-game. But another thing that I want to bring up is how she returned to being a villain afterwards. This pretty much confirms to me that the effects of the Traptanium are not permanent. This makes it pretty odd that the villains we use in Trap Team continue to work for us. So what I think is happening is that the Traptanium doesn't inherently make someone good, but somewhat convinces them to do good. But with that out the way, I think it's about time that we get into the final Skylander of today.
The doctor is in!
Now, I know for a fact that a lot of you are confused on why I'm covering Dr. Crankcase because he's one of the main Doom Raiders, but if I went over the Skylander that I was originally going to talk about, Pinata, I would be doing him an insane disservice due to the fact that there is so much stuff going on with him. So because of that, I switched his part out with Dr. Crankcase's, and to my surprise, he has a pretty interesting history. Nobody exactly knows what Dr. Crankcase is the doctor of, but what is known about him is that he has some of the most legendary technical achievements in all of Skylands, and his success in the field lies in his modified version of glowing green goo, which has the power to bring wooden objects to life, which he calls Evilkins. And even though it sounds like he stole the idea from Chaos, it was actually the opposite. He was actually the inspiration at one point to the evil Portal Master. So technically, he's the reason that the Willikins even exist. I don't exactly know when and how he joined the Doom Raiders, but he would be sent to Cloudcracker Prison alongside them, and he would eventually be broken out by Chaos and go on to be one of the major characters in Skylanders Trap Team, and would eventually be captured while he and Wolfgang captured Chaos. After his capture, the Skylanders would take him with them to Time Town, where he would be able to complete his villain quest, where he would destroy a Willikins diorama after he hinted that there would be something behind it. And apparently there was, as he got a free outfit out of all of that. And if you think that was a mess, then you have seen literally nothing yet. The L streak that would ensue is borderline insane. In the extra story in one of the Light and the Dark comics, the Doctor would attempt to race children in the annual Mabu Meander, so Nightmare stepped into the race as well, and even though he did everything he could to win it, as a participation prize, she would send him into a tree and give him a concussion that he would never forget. But things would get way worse for him. When he, Golden Queen, and Wolfgang infiltrated the academy, he would begin to go through the students' diplomas only to get sprayed in the face by some of the minis, and while he was chasing after them, he would crash into Wolfgang and knock both of them out. And after all of that, he would get the offer offered to all of the other Doom Raiders to clean the library for a year before becoming a sensei of the Quickshot class. Now, I apologize for cutting this short, but good lord, Crankcase was going out sad for a good chunk of the story. Not only did he lose a race to children, which I'll give him some slack for because he raced an adult centaur as well, but he would also get sunned by the minis, who weren't even considered Skylanders at that point. He was literally dog-walked by the collectibles that weren't even playable for 3 games, or even technically Skylanders up to that point. And for that, I'm kinda glad that he was made a Skylander so he didn't have to go out on that note. But with that out the way, I think it's about time that I finish this up. So, thank you all for watching. Like always, hit the subscribe button if you enjoy content like this, share this around so I can grow as a channel, leave some comments down below to make the algorithm happy, and I will see you all in the next one.